Well, welcome to art class. What you're looking at right here is a note-taking outline, and I'm going to attempt to conduct class the same way we do when we are in attendance physically with each other, and that would include some lectures and some discussion and questions, and also the fact that you will be expected to take down some notes which you will be able to use on quizzes at a later time. So if you take accurate notes down and you listen to the discussion and explanation, then you will be able to do very well on the quizzes. Without them, the quizzes can be very difficult. So my advice is to either go to the YouTube page, and I will have a note-taking outline photographed there so that you can click on that and you can do a screenshot of it or perhaps print it. Also, you can simply take a piece of paper and you can mark it off like this. A regular piece of notebook paper, 8.5 by 11, marked off similar to this, will help your notes have much more structure and clarity, and the notes will be graded as well as the quizzes. So it's important that you take accurate notes and that they are done in a structured manner so that you can use that information later as a resource when you take quizzes. So, thank you. Let's move on to the next thing. Well, what we'll be doing here today, or at least in this brief session, is normally in the physical classroom you would be given a set of prepared note-taking materials for lectures, and we will be having a lecture here on design before too long, and you will be expected to take notes down. Your notes will also be graded, and you will have to send me a photograph of the grading exercise you've gone through with your notes to show them to me. And so normally you get something like this, but I realize in a situation that we're in right now where we're not in the physical classroom together, you might need to make your own notes. Now you could do this on a piece of 8.5 by 11 inch printer paper if you so desired. However, you can use a regular piece of notebook paper, and I'm going to just briefly demonstrate how you can do that. And mine doesn't have holes punched in it, but most notebook paper does, and it was laid out on this kind of paper to begin with. And so we're simply going to use a black colored pencil in this case, and I like to just count down a few lines on each piece of notebook paper, and you can eventually get everything in there. And it looks like we're going to have about 12 things that we have to accommodate, plus the subject matter heading up there. So if we orient our ruler up here at the top of our notebook paper, it doesn't have to be precise, it just has to be somewhere up in here. Okay, now I'm not going to draw this outline around it. You can do that if you so desire, but I think that for the purposes of just taking notes, this would be fine. So we simply just, we're going to draw a line that goes all the way across the paper here, and then above that line we're going to reproduce some of this stuff right here. And one of those things will be maybe a couple of vertical marks to mark off where the end of our stuff is at. Okay, and we can just, right here, just like we've got, we'll just call this Art Notes. Now it's funny that we're drawing out our own notes, but why not? This is art class. Okay, now we're going to want to place a line in here so that we can put our subject headings and dates and stuff in there as well. So we make a little reference mark about right there. That ought to work for us. So we're going to make a long line and a shorter line, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be pretty good. Okay, and then we can do the same thing over here. And all this really is doing is giving us a place for our name, which would be very important in the physical classroom because students are constantly losing their papers, and then over here for what period that you're in. And that's pretty important as well, because I have a lot of students with the same names, and if I don't know what period it is that they're in, it's difficult for me to distinguish one person's handwriting from another. If I can get your notes back to you in the physical classroom, if I find your name, I'll get them back to you. Otherwise, you're really going to be out of luck. Now, it's important that our notes are organized in such a manner that you can find the appropriate set of notes to go with the quiz. You're allowed to use your notes on quizzes if you are wise enough to take these notes down accurately. And so in this case, I'm struggling here. In this case, we're just going to write our subject, what it is, in the notes, and I like to use what you all call a hashtag, but I call a number symbol, and that would be whatever subject that we are talking about periodically in the notes. And so it would be, for instance, design, or drawing, or painting, or the rules sometimes. That will be probably the first set of notes. And so also, the date that these notes were taken is also extremely important. If I should find your notes, I can figure out what day they were taken on, who it was that made them, what period they're in, and get it back to you before it's too late for something like a quiz to have taken place and you don't have your notes. Alright, so moving on here, and this is really quite simple, especially if you know how to use a ruler. We're not even going to measure down. We're just going to go down an appropriate amount of space. It looks like it's about 3 lines, 1, 2, 3 lines on your notebook paper. And we're going to, maybe 3 lines. Yeah, it looks like 3 full lines in there. We're going to strike off a marking. That's where the end of our first section of stuff will be. And up here we'll just put in there that this is historical context. This is where we talk about all of the history of where all these ideas came from. And there's quite a bit of information in there. So we just label that in. And once you have this outline made up, you could photograph it or scan it, and then you would always be able to, you wouldn't have to redo it every time. But it is art class, so you'll probably be okay. So I'm going to come down about 2 more lines on my notebook paper. I'm going to hold my ruler down and strike another line. And of course this will be subject number 1, so we'll just put a 1 next to it. I always like to put a line because it kind of tells me what it is I'm working on. And it looks like we just come down 2 more rows on our notebook paper, and we do another line, and we just continue this operation. So part 2 with a subject matter heading as well, a line to put our information on. Now it looks to me like 3 is bigger than the other ones. It's about the size of historical context, so better go 1, 2, 3 full lines before we put in the next one right there. And so organization of your notes is a big part of your ability to succeed with your notes as well. So it's important that you keep all this information organized. And once again, some of this can be free-handed. A lot of us are really uptight about lines and stuff, but I think for the purposes of these notes, some of it can be drawn with a ruler. Others you probably need to just loosen up a little bit and freehand these things, if your writing can be understood by you later. So simply going on again, 4, and just put our subject matter heading line right there. It looks like 5 is also 2 lines as well, so we just skip down 2 lines, make our line there. It separates our subjects from each other, or our subject matter heading line. And moving on, it looks like 6. It looks like it's got more stuff. I'll bet 3 lines. So we lay our ruler on the 3rd line there, make our marking, label it number 6, of course, and then so I like to go right to that red line on my paper, and it's probably on your notebook paper even if you have holes punched in it. So it looks like 7 is simply 2, so we'll lay it on that piece of notebook paper line and strike our mark across there, and we can number that up, of course, number 7, and then just put our subject matter heading line. It looks like number 8 over here is only 2 lines as well, so we'll just go 2 more lines and make another. There we go. So see, this is really quite simple, and I'm using a colored pencil so that you can see it clearly. Now when you're going to be doing this yourself, it might be also helpful if you were to use a colored pencil yourself, or even a maybe a fine line marker or a pen, but it could get smudgy. So it looks like 2 more lines for number 9, so we're going to simply keep it simple. That's all this is about, is keeping it simple, just staying organized so that when you have to find the information for a quiz, you know where it's at. Also, there will be an exercise, just like if we were in the real classroom, where we grade your notes. It looks like 10 has also got, we could probably give it 2 or 3 lines. We got lines left over here. Why don't we give it 3 lines? And then the same for the extra credit. We'll give 10 a little bit more room there. And then we've got the extra credit down here in this particular section below this line. X C is how we indicate extra credit, and there's always something meaningful down in there. Now, there will be some times, like if we do drawing exercises and drawing notes, and I will have you do drawing exercises on the back. And so there's periods of time when we will want to flip this over, and we'll simply estimate about halfway across it. We just estimate about halfway across. And we'll use a ruler to divide that off, like this. And then we'll just kind of estimate it into thirds, because there are exercises that we do where we have to do little pictures and drawings. And so if we section it all off into little compartments like that, then it makes it much more easy to continue our notes on the back sometimes when we have to do that. And so it's easier to find, easier to stay organized, easier to get the appropriate responses on quizzes, which are very difficult without the notes, or so everybody tells me. So that's a brief explanation of how we do our notes, preparing your own. You should do that because it's drawing anyway. Even drawing out charts and graphs is a very important type of drawing. And so in this case, we normally use these types of notes in the physical classroom. However, when we're not in a physical classroom, or we are making up work, or this is being presented in another format to you, then we may have to just do some drawing on our own. If you want to make the little outline around that, it's not only decorative, functional if you have to scan this, or if you have to take a photograph of it. Alright, that's how you make your notes, and we will be using them soon. Thank you.